Psychosis manifestations, planets and houses. The Sycosis Miasm in homeopathy is characterized by overgrowth, compulsiveness, and chronic inflammatory states. These traits manifest mentally and emotionally as obsessive thinking, compulsive behaviors, and feelings of secrecy and guilt. In astrology, these mental and emotional manifestations can be linked to planetary influences that govern abnormal expansion, obsession, and inner conflict, reflecting the chaotic and excessive tendencies seen in this miasm. Compulsiveness. Compulsiveness in psychosis reflects the mind's tendency to become fixated on certain ideas or behaviors, leading to repeated irrational actions or thoughts. The mind is constantly overstimulated, resulting in an obsession with control and repetition to relieve inner anxieties. Key planets. Mercury governs the intellect and thought processes. When afflicted, Mercury leads to obsessive, repetitive thoughts and an inability to disengage from specific mental patterns. Mental compulsiveness, such as constantly analyzing or repeating thoughts, is common when Mercury is overstimulated. Moon. The emotional mind, when afflicted, becomes hypersensitive and reactive. An overactive moon can result in emotional compulsiveness, where the individual feels driven to engage in repetitive emotional behaviors to manage anxiety or insecurity. Jupiter represents growth and expansion. When afflicted, Jupiter can lead to mental and emotional overgrowth, creating a tendency toward compulsive actions or beliefs that become exaggerated. There may be a feeling that certain behaviors must be repeated or followed rigorously. Rahu governs abnormal expansion, obsession, and illusion. When Rahu influences Mercury or the Moon, it can result in obsessive thinking or actions, driving the individual to engage in compulsive behaviors without understanding why. Rahu causes a state of hyperfocus and distortion, where the individual feels consumed by irrational needs or ideas. Key houses. Sixth house governs daily habits, health routines, and compulsive behaviors. When afflicted, especially by Mercury or Rahu, compulsiveness dominates daily routines. The native may feel an overwhelming need to repeat tasks or adhere to specific habits. 12th house represents the subconscious mind and hidden fears. Afflictions here, especially with the influence of Rahu or the Moon, can cause compulsive behaviors to surface from unresolved anxieties or subconscious fears. This leads to obsessive actions or routines to manage underlying mental tension. Third house governs the mind, communication, and thinking patterns. Afflictions in this house, particularly by Mercury or Rahu, lead to overactive thinking, compulsive speech, or repetitive thought processes. The mind becomes trapped in cycles of obsession and compulsion. Conjunctions. Mercury-Moon. This combination can lead to obsessive-compulsive thinking and emotional fixation. The native may feel compelled to overthink or emotionally overreact, engaging in repetitive mental or emotional behaviors to cope with inner stress. Rahu-Mercury exaggerates mental compulsiveness and the need for control. The native may feel an uncontrollable urge to engage in repetitive thought patterns or behaviors that seem necessary to avoid internal chaos. Rahu-Jupiter causes obsessive expansion of ideas or actions. The individual may feel compelled to pursue exaggerated beliefs or routines, often becoming overly focused on specific tasks or rituals that are amplified beyond reason. Secrecy and guilt. Secrecy and guilt are dominant emotional characteristics of psychosis. There is often an underlying feeling of shame or the need to hide certain behaviors, thoughts, or emotions from others. This sense of guilt leads to emotional repression, which intensifies the compulsive behaviors associated with psychosis. The secrecy stems from fear of exposure or judgment. Key planets. Moon represents the emotional mind and subconscious guilt. When afflicted, the Moon can cause feelings of guilt, especially related to emotional behavior or thoughts that the individual feels must be hidden. Emotional repression becomes a coping mechanism for dealing with inner guilt. Mercury. When Mercury is afflicted, particularly in combination with Rahu, it leads to obsessive secrecy surrounding thoughts or communication. The individual may feel guilt or shame about their intellectual processes, leading to secrecy or withholding information. Jupiter represents moral and ethical beliefs. When Jupiter is afflicted, particularly by Rahu, it leads to guilt stemming from conflicts between personal actions and moral ideals. The individual may feel compelled to hide their behavior to avoid judgment or guilt. Rahu exaggerates secrecy and guilt by causing an irrational fear of exposure. The individual becomes obsessed with hiding certain actions or thoughts, feeling that they must conceal their true self to avoid criticism or shame. Key houses. Fourth house governs emotional security and the private self. Afflictions here, especially by Rahu or the moon, can lead to a deep sense of emotional guilt or a fear of emotional exposure. The native may feel compelled to hide their feelings or actions out of fear of being judged or misunderstood. Eighth house, associated with secrecy, hidden matters, and guilt. If afflicted by Rahu or the moon, this house intensifies the native's sense of guilt and need for secrecy, especially regarding personal or emotional matters that feel too shameful to reveal. 12th house represents the subconscious mind and hidden fears. Afflictions here can cause feelings of guilt and the need for secrecy to surface from unresolved subconscious conflicts. The native may feel a strong compulsion to hide their thoughts or behaviors, fearing exposure or judgment. Conjunctions. Moon's Rahu. This combination amplifies emotional secrecy and guilt. The individual may feel an exaggerated need to hide their emotions or actions, fearing exposure or rejection. Emotional guilt becomes overwhelming, leading to further emotional repression. Rahu's Jupiter creates inner conflict between moral beliefs and personal behavior. The individual may feel guilty about actions that contradict their ethical standards, leading to obsessive secrecy and efforts to hide their behavior from others. Rahu, Mercury, amplifies mental guilt and secrecy. The native may feel compelled to conceal their thoughts or communication, fearing judgment or exposure. There may be an obsessive need to keep certain ideas or conversations hidden from others. By examining how planetary influences and house placements reflect these emotional and mental tendencies, we can better understand the compulsive behaviors, secrecy, and guilt that are characteristic of the Sycosis Miasm. The planets associated with growth, obsession, and emotional intensity drive these manifestations in the individual's psychological state. Suppression of emotions. In the Sycosis Miasm, there is a strong tendency toward emotional suppression. Individuals often suppress their emotions out of fear of losing control or to avoid the overwhelming feelings associated with their compulsions and guilt. This emotional repression can lead to internal conflict and emotional stagnation. Planets. Moon governs the emotional mind. When the moon is afflicted, particularly by Rahu or Mercury, it leads to the suppression of emotions. The native may feel unable to express their true feelings due to fear of judgment or fear of triggering deeper emotional unrest. Mercury. Although Mercury typically governs thought processes, its afflictions in emotional contexts can lead to intellectualizing emotions rather than expressing them. The individual may suppress emotions by analyzing or rationalizing them instead of allowing natural expression. Jupiter represents expansion and emotional optimism. When afflicted, Jupiter's natural emotional openness becomes restricted, leading to the suppression of emotions. The native may feel emotionally confined and unable to express feelings freely, especially when they conflict with personal beliefs or societal expectations. Rahu exaggerates emotional suppression by creating irrational fears around emotional expression. The native may fear that expressing their emotions will lead to exposure or loss of control, driving them to hide or suppress their feelings. 4th house governs emotional security and comfort. When afflicted by Rahu or the moon, the individual may struggle to express emotions within their private life. Emotional suppression can occur within the family or home, where the native feels the need to hide or control their emotions. 12th house represents hidden emotions and subconscious fears. Afflictions here can cause emotions to be deeply suppressed, leading to an avoidance of emotional expression. The native may withdraw into themselves, burying their feelings out of fear or discomfort with emotional exposure. House associated with hidden aspects of the self, including emotions. When this house is afflicted, particularly by Rahu or the moon, emotional repression can become intense. The native may fear deep emotions and prefer to keep them hidden, leading to internal emotional turmoil. Conjunctions. Moon plus Rahu This combination often results in suppressed emotions due to exaggerated fears of emotional exposure. The individual may feel overwhelmed by their emotions and choose to suppress them to maintain control or avoid feeling vulnerable. Mercury Moon. When these two planets are afflicted, the native may suppress emotions by overanalyzing or rationalizing them, rather than experiencing them fully. There is a tendency to intellectualize emotions rather than express them naturally. Rahu plus Jupiter creates an emotional conflict where the native feels restricted in expressing their emotions due to fear of judgment or the feeling that their emotions are inappropriate or too overwhelming to reveal. Fear of being exposed. The fear of exposure is a defining emotional trait of the Sycosis Miasm. Individuals often feel a deep-seated fear of having their secrets, emotions, or true selves revealed. This fear drives them to hide or suppress not only their emotions, but also their behaviors, thoughts, and compulsions. Key planets. Moon. When afflicted, the moon can cause an intense fear of emotional vulnerability. The native may fear that showing their true emotions will result in rejection or judgment, leading to a tendency to hide their feelings from others. Mercury. Afflicted Mercury, particularly in combination with Rahu, can result in a fear of having thoughts, ideas, or communication exposed. The individual may feel a strong need to conceal their intellectual processes out of fear of being misunderstood or criticized. Jupiter represents moral and ethical beliefs. When Jupiter is afflicted, particularly by Rahu, the individual may fear that their actions or thoughts will be exposed as contradictory to their moral values, leading to intense feelings of guilt and shame. Rahu governs illusions and fears around exposure. Rahu's influence can cause irrational fears about being exposed or discovered, particularly when it comes to personal or emotional matters. This fear of exposure can drive obsessive secrecy and avoidance of vulnerability. Key houses. Fourth house represents emotional security and the private self. When this house is afflicted, particularly by Rahu or the moon, the individual may fear having their emotions or personal life exposed to others. This fear can lead to a strong need to keep personal matters hidden. 12th house governs hidden fears and subconscious patterns. Affliction of the 12th house by Rahu or the moon can cause an irrational fear of being exposed, particularly when it comes to private thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. The individual may go to great lengths to conceal aspects of themselves out of fear of judgment. 8th house, associated with secrets and hidden matters. When this house is afflicted, especially by Rahu or Jupiter, the individual may fear that their deepest secrets will be exposed. This fear of exposure can lead to a strong need to protect personal information and conceal true emotions or behaviors. Conjunctions. Rahu Moon. This combination creates an exaggerated fear of emotional exposure. The individual may feel that revealing their emotions will lead to vulnerability and rejection, causing them to hide their true feelings and retreat into emotional secrecy. Rahu Jupiter leads to a fear of moral or ethical exposure. The native may feel that their personal actions or thoughts contradict their moral values, leading to an intense fear of being judged or criticized if these aspects of themselves are revealed. Mercury's Rahu. This combination results in a fear of intellectual or communicative exposure. The native may feel that revealing their thoughts or ideas will lead to misunderstanding or criticism, causing them to hide or withhold communication. By examining the planetary influences and house placements, we can better understand the emotional repression, secrecy, and fear of exposure that characterize the Sycosis Miasm. The individual is driven by deep-seated fears and compulsive behaviors, leading to emotional suppression and a strong desire to avoid being revealed or judged.